Welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports people who are navigating STI stigma, primarily herpes, by connecting them to various mental health resources under the umbrella, from therapy to counseling, group therapy, support groups, mentorship, and I think that covers everything under the umbrella. Oh, there's yoga classes, but anything that's just good for your mental health. That's, I guess, now 5 years later, 5.5 years later, that like brings full circle the concept of this being something positive for positive people. All right, I am here today with Zach. This will be the concluding episode of the Oregon Health Authority podcast episode series. So thank you for helping me close this out.
Yeah.
I think I had 9 or 10 episodes done. I had 10 interviews with people who were in Oregon, and this was in June. I had them all lined up, and then from July to August up till just now in September was when I was able to get the last 2 people. So I was getting nervous for a while, but so just quick overview of the survey that you submitted. You're Zach, 38, male, he, him pronouns, heterosexual, sex positive, into kink and BDSM, positive for genital HSV2. And then we talk a little bit about your experience when you received your diagnosis from your healthcare provider. So I guess we can just start with that. You
Yeah, sure.
want to just tell me about the initial outbreak?
Yeah. So what happened? I was actually with a partner that I was seeing at the time exclusively for I think it had been a full like 3 months. We had pretty much only been having sex without a condom or anything or protection, and so it wasn't until about say 3 months or so that I basically just woke up in the morning and had a really bad outbreak. I had really bad flu symptoms. Um, you know, just everything. It wasn't good. So I was like, I had a feeling. It's kind of a crazy thing because you don't like. It's not something you've ever experienced before. So you kind of wake up and you're like, in the back of in my head, I was just like, okay, this is probably herpes or something, but it was kind of confusing because like I guess I didn't know enough about it. Like we'd been having sex for quite some time. And so did that. Kind of talked to my partner, and at that point she let me know of I think it was maybe about like 8 months before that she had experienced some kind of outbreak. It didn't sound like really as bad as what I had had. Supposedly went to Planned Parenthood, got checked out, and they didn't seem to think it was uh, herpes. And so they basically told her it was fine. I think they did a swab test, but not a blood test, and basically told her she was fine. So didn't feel a need to disclose that or anything because talked to a doctor and they said she was okay. So she immediately felt really bad because she was worried that she had accidentally given me HSV. And so, yeah, so anyway, I went to Planned Parenthood, which is kind of an interesting experience. Like, um, you know, I get there, the doctor had checked, the physician had checked it out. Um, it was really bad, but it was kind of weird because the physician like kind of like gasped and recoiled at it, too. So it's already like this is already like a kind of a like a already in a weird headspace there, and then she's like, I'm like, oh my god, I'm a monster, So kind of that feeling away. It's like she was, of course, they have to be super careful with it, but the way she kind of was super careful about it felt like a little bit weird. But anyway, they did a swab test. They also did a blood test, just because I mean she was at that point the physician was pretty convinced it was HSV2, um, and so yeah, did that and got a message from Planned Parenthood the next day, I believe it was. This was back in, I should say this is back in 2017. And so got a message next day, talked to him, went through the whole thing. by information about, disclosing or letting past partners and stuff know. Then my partner at the time went back and got diagnosed herself as well. It was kind of interesting. Like at first, I mean, I was more concerned with at the time, I guess. Like, I mean, of course it wasn't great, but she clearly felt like really, really, really bad. So I was kind of in a way more concerned with like that, just kind of managing that and not wanting her to have to feel that way. At the time too, it's kind of interesting. I think different people have different experiences where they get it just from a casual sex partner or whatever. But from my experience, it was like, like it was somebody I was with, so I was like, you know what? Well, we both have it, and like I wasn't too worried about it. It's not like I was like thinking at the time like trying to date down the line. It's not like, oh God, how am I gonna do this now? So yeah, that was kind of the initial experience or whatever. Yeah.
So, of all of that, there were 3 points I wanted to jump in and ask a question,
Sure.
but you
Yeah,
answered
yeah.
one about the timing of it because I was
Yeah.
curious about that.
Sure.
You went to Planned Parenthood, which is also interesting. Did you know at the time that you could go to Planned Parenthood? Because I thought at the time that I was diagnosed, for example, I thought they only served women.
Oh yeah, no, I did know, and I had been there for just like regular STI screening and stuff before too. Also, my partner at the time was uh, kind of really well versed in that as well too. So,
Okay.
so yeah,
Cool.
yeah, yeah,
And then the third thing we speak to, it is interesting when you're in a relationship and then, someone tests positive, the stories behind that, because
yeah,
we don't
totally,
really get to hear that.
yeah,
We assume, like you said, that it might have been like a one-time thing or that someone was being promiscuous and
yeah,
that's how
yeah,
it happens. But
yeah, yeah.
that's not always the case.
No, and I didn't think so. I mean, we had openly talked about interest in, kind of having fun with other people in different scenarios with that. We were both very open with that. That's been something I was interested in for kind of in the back of my head and didn't really enact it until, later in life, basically. But I didn't have any kind of feeling like, she had picked it up during the course of our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Never really suspected that, really didn't think that would be a case or anything like that. It was kind of interesting too. It really didn't hit me super hard until the relationship ended, and then I was like, "Oh shit! Now I have to try to do this." And like before, if you have to disclose, even if it's like a casual partner you have with while you're in a relationship, it's like whatever, like not a big deal. But going forward, it's like, man, how am I ever gonna, it's gonna be it felt really like it was gonna be a struggle to get people to accept that. Like the first date I went on, first person I started dating after that, she she like I don't know. I guess I kind of feel not to sound shallow, but I felt like I was kind of went a little below what I'm usually attracted to. You know what I'm saying?
Where you're just kind of like shooting at
Yeah,
to feel it out. You're just kind of
yeah,
shooting yourself to
exactly.
feel it
Just
out.
kind of going the safe route, I
Yeah.
guess. Hopefully that doesn't sound terrible, but that's what I was like kind of feeling and kind of what I felt like was going to help. Unfortunately, so we dated for we went on a few dates um, and it was really fun, and we got things got a little hot and heavy, and clearly sex was about to happen, and I disclosed, and this was kind of lesson two. We weren't drunk, but we had been having some drinks, and at the time, she was like, "Well, yeah, let's do it anyway." And then the next day, called me up, and her sister's a nurse, and very like she told her don't do it basically. So she's like, so she basically like called it off, and this was my first experience like from coming back with that. So it's like, oh my god, this is how it's gonna be or whatever. But honestly, after that, like it became easier, and you almost get better at it. I think there's something to be said about disclosing in a way that is not where you don't necessarily have to do it with a bunch of self remorse, like I probably was conveying at the time. And yeah, it got definitely way easier, and like since then, I didn't really have a single person that I had dated or hooked up with that really had any kind of big issue with it, as well too. So that's cool because that first one was like, oh my god, here we go,
I think
So
that's
yeah,
the worst too, where you
yeah,
get a
yeah,
yes and then it turns into a no because
yeah,
you kind of get
exactly,
excited or you get
yeah, exactly,
like
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
then
totally, yeah.
the rejection is just like you fall from a higher height.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I even remember though, like even when we did sleep together, I felt like a little weird about it. Like I felt a little concerned. Like I couldn't, like I was thinking a lot about like, oh, I don't, worrying about passing it on to this person and that too. But all that stuff got like a lot easier over time.
Hmm.
Now I don't even, I mean, I have a, you know, partner now. She also has HSV2, but even beyond that, like it doesn't even before we were even together. It was, with casual partners I might see now, it doesn't. It like at this point, it's just like if they were to say no, that's totally cool. Like not a problem. I mean, it would have been fine before too. It's not like the end of the world or anything, but it's just gotten a lot easier for sure. Like yeah, it doesn't like trip me out at all. I just do it, and most of the time they're cool with it. So.
How did you talk about sexual health or STI testing? Because you did mention when you were even with your partner at the time that you got diagnosed,
Yeah.
that you had gone to Planned Parenthood for routine testing.
Sure.
So, out of
Yeah, yeah.
curiosity, what was your communication around STIs like before your diagnosis?
Yeah, so basically, I mean, I don't know. I guess there'd be generally conversations and basically on the just just quick conversations about like, when was the last time her STI tested. This definitely did get me more on a thing where I mean, especially like there'd be times when I would just take somebody's word for it and not use a condom, and that's that is what it is. But now, if it's like if anything were to happen, I've just used a condom with casual partners or whatever since then. But if anything were to happen, or especially relationships where they don't have HSV2, um, so they yeah, I would before kind of take their word for it, but now especially since I'm at risk of you know giving somebody herpes, then it's more of a like I don't know. There's more of a conversation now for sure. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So, how'd your conversation change? I guess I know there's more of a conversation now because there's a concern about passing herpes on to a partner,
yeah,
making
definitely,
sure that they're okay with it.
yeah,
Um, but pre diagnosis, there was like a little bit of a convo.
yeah, yeah.
Post diagnosis, now it's that convo. Do you feel like it's more necessary to have because you have herpes, and do you find that you're the one who often initiates it?
It's a mixed bag. I would say, especially people are. I feel like up in Portland here, people are very well sexually versed and pretty responsible for the most part. I mean, not always, but in a way, like in a big way, a lot of times they are. So I've had women, especially recently, that will bring it up, and I'm happy to have that conversation too. It definitely made me more aware of possibilities of even things beyond herpes to be really careful of and have safe practices, whether it's like mutual STI testing. Like I haven't really, I have been with people who also have genital herpes beyond my regular primary partner, um, and and there's been kind of talk like, well, if we keep doing it for a while, maybe we could both, and we want to not use a condom, maybe we could both get tested and whatever. But it never really seemed necessary. Like
I want to
like
I want to speak to that because there is so much emphasis on use a condom, use a condom. However, there's no regard for the fact that like in porn, we never see condoms
yeah, yeah,
and we don't even question STIs in
mm,
that setting.
yeah,
So for everyday common folk, civilians as we
yeah,
might call
totally,
ourselves,
yeah,
there's almost no regard for how important communication is in regard to STD prevention, STI minimization, because you can use a condom all the time and have this assumption in the back of your mind that you're not going to get anything
Yeah,
in.
yeah,
Stuff happens.
yeah,
Condoms break, they slip off, there's play around using condoms.
yeah.
But we will operate under the assumption that communication isn't really necessary as long as there's a condom involved.
Yeah.
Rather than having the communication, and if condoms are not involved, like understand that there's still that level of protection there because one, we were willing to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And two, if we're feeling good about how it is laid out, then we may find ourselves in situations where we're not using condoms, but we're still at a lower risk of STIs than someone who uses a condom and does not use communication. So this is like a rant that I've been going on lately because there is an aspect of communication that is just left out of the conversation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's a lot easier to do until something hits you, until you have an experience. So for some people, it's as simple as not to rank STIs or anything, but for some people, it's as simple as getting chlamydia or something, and you take some antibiotics, that goes away, but that's enough for some people to be like, whoa, I gotta figure this out in a better way, and a lot of people I feel like might come to more of a conclusion that they do need to communicate more, and yeah, and that's definitely with this experience especially, that's definitely brought that out more for me. Like it's a very it's a real thing, and it seems like it can't happen to you till it does, So yeah, absolutely.
So speaking to the communication component, something I found is after my diagnosis of genital HSV2 was that sex had to start to look a little bit different. Maybe I have an outbreak, maybe someone's uncomfortable with touching that affected area.
Yeah.
So sex evolved, and then I found myself into the space of kink, BDSM, and the different relationship dynamics that come with that. So I'm curious, mine happened after my diagnosis. Were you already involved in the kink space or sex positive space prior to your diagnosis?
No, actually I wasn't. I guess I had been somewhat interested. I would say, I guess in a way it was very less distinct kink. Like I would, you know, sometimes take on a more dominant role with, women I'm, I'm sleeping with or whatever the case is, but nothing too specific where, you know, toys and other kind of tools of BDSM would come into play.
It's
there.
funny you say tools because I talk about how women call it sex toys.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you call it sex tools, guys
Wait
a minute, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, and in kink and BDSM, have you found that space has done anything for you? Vaguely, I'm gonna just ask that. What has being someone who's tested positive for herpes and entered the BDSM kink space, what has that done for you?
So for me, it's interesting because I don't necessarily relate them as a function of okay, well, this is easier to do without actually having penetration. It's just I'm a very explorative person, and I like to try all kinds of different dynamics, situations, environments, all kinds of stuff like that. And for me, it was just more about exploring. I tend to be somebody who will be explore something and be okay, what else can we explore now? And kind of go through all those motions and stuff. But yeah, I mean, it is definitely, it's kind of interesting because it can't exist beyond, it does, say I'm negotiating a scene or an encounter with somebody. It's kind of interesting because you could do that, and if you don't think that if you're not negotiating penetration or things that could pass on HSV, then you could kind of you don't necessarily have to disclose right then, but if it gets to the point where that's part of the conversation, then clearly I would anyway, or you should or whatever. But so yeah, it's kind of interesting in that way that you could kind of have these sexual talks and encounters and get to a certain point that's pretty deep with before it's oh well, you want to have, oral sex or penetrative sex, and then it's like, okay, now we have to have a conversation or whatever. So that's kind of an interesting like aspect of it for sure. So
Did negotiations for you take place prior to your experience in kink and BDSM?
yeah, generally, I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, but generally it yeah just takes place prior. Yeah, just good to have conversation. Sometimes it's like immediately before too, depending on the situation too. So
I'm sorry, before your
oh,
diagnosis.
before my
Yeah.
diagnosis, yeah, I wasn't like too involved. Like I guess it would. Like I mean, I guess it would. Like I'm not gonna just if somebody wants to like be spanked or choked or whatever. Like I'm not necessarily just gonna go for like grab their throat or anything because that could get a little weird. So yeah, it'll be conversations about that. I've usually been pretty much always been pretty open and actually really enjoy talking about that because I really enjoy the kind of like psychological aspect of it as well and like not only like what they like but kind of why they like it too, I guess so,
Okay.
and how that fits in. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And the reason I ask is because negotiations is a very important word that I think that a lot of people who are maybe not in the sex positive space
sure,
can really benefit from.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
when I hear negotiations, I don't just think of penetrative sex.
yeah,
Negotiations are, how are we going to interact? Like going to a sex club with a friend. Like, all
sure,
right,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
in this environment. Like, what are our boundaries?
yeah,
Speaking to just how someone wants to be touched, what a relationship is going to look like. There are so many aspects of negotiations that fall under the category of even just like relationship
yeah,
intentions.
yeah, exactly. Just simply people having a conversation of like, what is this right now, or as simple as that.
What are
So
we?
yeah, what are we? What's going on? So yeah, I think that's completely true. Yeah, totally.
And how did you learn to go through negotiations?
I mean, I guess a little of it was intuitive, but I have read about stuff like that. I'm on the internet. Like I tend to like when I get interested in something, want to learn everything I can about it, and so I could kind of navigate it the
Same.
best way I can. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And when you got into the BDSM negotiations, nope, that's not what I meant to say. I was going to try and transition this to how testing positive for an STI changed the way that you engage in sexual relationships.
sure, yeah. I
What a
mean,
poor segue.
it's okay.
I will leave that in. We're human.
Yeah, there you go. So how did negotiations change the way I do? How did it change from before to after?
Correct.
Yeah, I guess like, well, I guess my getting deeper into BDSM, maybe coincidentally, maybe not, kind of coincided pretty closely um, with being diagnosed with herpes. Um, so I guess that's a factor because like once kind of like we were talking about before, it's just like there'd be negotiations of like kind of like you're talking about like what is this like what are we doing or even in like very kind of more vague um, sexual scenarios or whatever like before diagnosis and then afterward it was uh, very much like a lot more in-depth talk but that kind of has to go with having a little bit uh, more gears to it because of like kink and stuff. So
Okay.
yeah,
All right. So this seemed to have been a space where you were able to, I don't know, I guess like as someone with herpes, understanding and exploring that space of kink and being able to negotiate and communicate. Like communicate is the word that keeps like knocking me in the back of my
oh
head
yeah, totally,
because
yeah,
communication is
yeah,
like the core of what someone who has tested positive for an STI I think
yeah,
goes on to learn. It's important to not only be able to communicate but understand how you communicate and
yeah,
how others
absolutely.
are receiving your communication. And it sounds like that's something that through practice you've been able to. You said you started out with it intuitively. There's things that you just know.
Sure.
Um, have has the way that people communicated with you changed since your herpes diagnosis?
In a way, I guess it depends. It depends on the person. It also depends. My partner and I weren't for the last up until about 9 months ago. Weren't living in this area, um, and living in an area that's not quite as open and sex positive as Portland, Oregon is. So it's. I mean, I guess that's a factor. I mean, there's so many factors. It's hard to tell which are variables and like variants and what's actually like directly related to that. So yeah, shit, I lost my train of thought.
No, no, because where you were going with that, speaking about Oregon in itself, like
Sure.
Portland, Oregon
Yeah, yeah,
specifically, because you did mention earlier that this is a much more sex positive, receptive place, and people are on top of their sexual
yeah.
health. And what I'm finding here too throughout these podcast episodes is that there's something to be said for sex positivity
Mm,
and like how prevalent that is and the way that people communicate amongst each other in
mm.
regards to sex and their negotiations.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
there's
yeah.
absolutely something there to be said. And I think that what a lot of people have learned through sex positivity and
Mm,
what that all encompasses, it really does contribute to how well they communicate and how their communication is received, how they receive communication from others. And I think that this is directly something that challenges current STD prevention efforts because I think that we live in a very sex avoidant society, not
absolutely.
necessarily
Yeah,
sex negative,
yeah,
but take the phrase wear a condom every time.
yeah, yeah,
That's avoidance because we don't have to communicate. We just wear a condom,
yeah.
right? So now coming into a space where we can and we are encouraged to communicate,
Mm,
and it's like it's supported, like it's encouraged. People are like, yeah, let's communicate consent. Like I can't tell you how many places I go and I see things like ask for whatever,
yeah,
ask, get consent.
yeah.
um and this is just like such a sex positive atmosphere in
Absolutely,
general.
yeah. And it makes it not only is it just work better for establishing healthy communicative relationships, regardless of how serious they are, but it's also just makes everybody safer too. So yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like back when I was in where we were living before, I was with somebody before my partner, and we were in like an exclusive relationship. And I mean, I disclosed, and she's like was really into it, and not having herpes, but like the relationship itself, and when we first started dating, and so we'd just have sex with the condom for a while. I think like a few months in, maybe I can't remember how long, but like at one point she wanted to have sex without a condom. I don't really get like I got like a really bad outbreak at first, and then like a few more, and then I generally don't get them too much. So, well, you know, possibly less of a risk. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't get it. You can't pass it on. But she wanted to have sex without a condom one night, and I remember after we were done, and she didn't even mean this in a bad way, but it was still kind of strange. But after we were done, she said, "I feel like a vampire." Like she had like I had like bitten her or something like that. Like I feel like but it was in like a
Like a
endearing way. But
funny
yeah,
or
it
yeah,
wasn't like in a oh god, I feel like a vampire. So in a way, I was like kind of wondering if she was just like ready to get it, and we just both have it or something. Which is that I it was
kind of
kind of
like this,
interesting.
let's just get it over with.
But at the
Like
same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, man, I feel like a monster right now. Like that's literally like it's not. I guess it's kind of like that, but I don't know. Yeah, so but not that bad. I mean, it was fine. I could tell that she didn't mean anything by it too. So
yeah.
just kind of roll with it. But yeah.
Since your HSV diagnosis, have you tested positive for another STI?
No. Yeah. No. Yeah. I guess that comes with well, long before many years ago, I had gotten chlamydia before and tested positive for that. And, took antibiotics, but uh, yeah, since this, I haven't, there hasn't been, haven't tested positive for anything. So
Was there much of a difference between how you responded to testing positive for chlamydia versus herpes?
yeah, I don't know. Like I guess there was because with chlamydia, I mean, especially the fact that I felt so sick and I just had such a painful outbreak. I was out of work for like 3, 4 days, like it was that bad. I had even told like my boss at the time, which was kind of surprising. And afterward, like I was like, man, should I have done that? But um, yeah, it's like, yeah, so
Okay.
sure.
And that speaks to, again, just like how we learn to communicate after the fact. Like we test positive and then we go on and the communication shifts. And I think that that's something too to be said for how we can minimize the possibility of transmissions and new infections just through communication. Uh, did you get your communication skills and like learn how to disclose or learn anything about herpes from your healthcare provider?
A little bit. It wasn't like a little bit. I had to do a lot of my own research, and it seemed like there was still a lot of gray areas, and it's still to this day. Like what's safe? Like can you receive oral sex without a condom? Is that safe? What kind of risk does that you know what are like statistically what are the odds that you can pass on that way and stuff like that too. So yeah.
Okay. What information do you wish that you had from your healthcare provider upon your diagnosis?
Let's see here.
It can be something that you later found on your own or something that just doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
well, I mean, they didn't really tell me like statistically. Like, I think it would have been helpful to know how common it is. Like, they didn't really touch on, like, yeah, a massive percent of people have it, and a massive percent of those people don't even know. Uh, and which is still kind of confusing to me how they know that statistic too. Like, how do they get the statistic of people that have it but don't know? Like where do they get that from? Maybe just from the after the fact or something like that too. But yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And I guess the last question I have for you really is, we just had this discussion. I want to know what to you makes safe sex.
Safe sex.
Let's call it safer sex.
Safer sex. I guess I don't know. I guess STI screening, like talking about um, being able to trust somebody enough to know that they're telling you the truth about what their STI status is and when they have actually been tested, and just using condoms when there's any kind of like doubt or gray area with that stuff. So
Okay.
yeah,
When in doubt, get the condom out
there you go.
and
Yeah.
communicate. All right, Zach, man. Well, I thank you for this conversation. Thanks for helping me close this out.
Yeah, thank you.
We
Appreciate
got
it.
through all
It's
of our
good talk.
questions. Is there anything that you would want to leave with someone, let's say, who's newly diagnosed with herpes?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's really not going to be as bad as you think it is right now. Like literally everybody is going through or has been through what you're going through right now, and it gets a lot easier. Like your value as a person and your ability to form meaningful relationships and connect with people and all that. It's not going to curb that. If anything, it makes you better at it. Like maybe that's a little too fantastic, but I honestly think that you get better. I mean, in a way, you gain more confidence. Like you get through all that, and you get through those first few really tough times of disclosing, and you get through that, and you're like, damn, I did that, and you go forward, not really being afraid of too much in that regard. So you'll be all right.
Yeah. All right. I say conquer the communication. That's what we want to do. This concludes this Oregon Health Authority series, yay! But also this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, subscribe to, share this podcast. I can be found through the website, www.spfpp.org, if you want to connect with me. If you are looking for mental health services, yoga classes, counseling, therapy, coaching, mentoring, reach out. Courtney at SPFPP.org is my email address. You can also follow me on social media at Courtney Brame, all one word, and then underscore. So just my name, Courtney Brame underscore. And but I'm mostly going to be taking steps back from social media to more so focus on the business side of something positive for positive people. So if you want to support us, please make a donation. Reach out, let me know you made a donation, and just however you feel is best for you to be able to contribute to the cause, please consider doing so. Till next time, stay sex positive.